Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest is Professor Gilles-Eric Séralini, Professor of Molecular Biology at the University of Caen in France. Professor Seralini's studies on the safety of genetically modified organisms have seen the publication of over 100 scientific articles and conference papers relating to food safety. He has concluded from these studies it is too soon to declare genetically modified organisms safe for human consumption. He's associated with CRIIGEN, a unique international group of experts having a transdisciplinary approach on the benefits and risks of genetic engineering and on alternatives. It is independent from biotech companies and promotes counter-analysis. CRIIGEN is the Committee for Research and Independent Information on Genetic Engineering. Dr. Seralini is a molecular biology professor at Caen University, has been since 1991 in France. He's a researcher, a teacher in charge of a team, and an author. He's one of the very first to demand a European commercial moratorium on agricultural GMOs for further research. He was appointed a member of 2 governmental commissions on GMO, the Biomolecular Engineering Commission, in charge of risk assessment, and the Biovigilance Committee, assessing GMOs after they have seen commercialization in 1998. He's the president of CRIIGEN, Scientific Board, and the Committee of Independent Research and Information in Genetic Engineering since 1999. He was appointed in 2003 as an expert for the European Commission to prepare for the defense case in the dispute between the United States, Argentina, Canada, who produce 95% of GMOs, and the European Union, and about the moratorium on commercial GMOs. He's published in November 2003, Flammarion in 2004, and recently in Flammarion Favillard. Now, welcome with me, the esteemed Professor, Professor Gilles-Eric Séralini. Dr. Seralini.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for this introduction.
Well, today's discussion is something that you are particularly expert in relating to our audience, which is food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. What is a genetically modified organism? Dr. Seralini.
First of all, it is not really well known that all agricultural GMOs commercialized at a large scale are just pesticide plants. That means that 80% of those are modified to be able to absorb the main pesticide of the world without dying. This pesticide is Roundup, and it's an herbicide, so the plant becomes with more and more residues of this pesticide, and then 20% of other agricultural GMOs are insecticide plants, so an insecticide is also a pesticide. That means that the plants are modified to produce on their own, in their cells, some new modified pesticides. Well, of course, they are derived from a natural toxin in the soil, in bacteria of the soil, but these plants are also full of new toxins that were not tested before on human cells, except by our group at the beginning of the year. And we have demonstrated now in a journal called Food and Chemical Toxicology, which is the best food toxicology journal in the world, an American one, that the long-term consumption of the GM NK603 maize, which is maize being able to absorb the pesticide Roundup without dying, was in fact toxic on rats on the long term. And the rat is the usual mammalian model in order to study the health risks before going to clinical trials, but there are no clinical trials for GMOs, as you know. And we have also tested in this study Roundup, which is the major herbicide of the world at very low levels, like it is diluted in the bottle of the agricultural worker or the gardener. This had never been done before because only one of its compounds had been tested during 2 years, called glyphosate, by the company. And we have demonstrated that the long-term consumption of the whole herbicide formulation, highly diluted, like zero point 0.1 ppb, part per billion, this was creating tumors and mammary tumors also, and also hepatorenal toxicity, so that means liver and kidneys toxicity. So the regulatory agencies of that have already accepted these products are really upset and discredit our work, while a growing part of the scientific community, 150 scientists around that from the world, today are defending our work, underlining its originality and the fact that scientists that have demonstrated new risks are always attacked. This is a fact today.
Wonderful. Dr. Seralini, maybe I can back up and just ask you in general, what does a GMO do to food, genetically modified organism?
The GMOs, the agricultural edible GMOs, well, I am in favor of biotechnologies. I am teaching biotechnologies, and I am also making transgenic bacteria in order to study genes. I think it's another story when you put these products in the diet or in the field without enough testing. And this is why I have studied these GMOs that are pesticide plants, agricultural GMOs. Either they absorb the Roundup or the Roundup, which is the major herbicide of the world, or they produce a new insecticide which can be toxic also.
So what the GMO does is it makes the plant resistant to Roundup. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not really. This is the advertising. The plant is resistant to Roundup. It is not, in fact. It's collaborating with Roundup. It works with it. That means that the plant do contains these residues in higher quantities. It doesn't eliminate those residues. That could be suggested by the word resistant to Roundup. Monsanto itself, the big company that has commercialized these products, has put on his files Roundup Ready tolerant soya or maize. So the tolerance is that the plant accepts the residues and lives with it. So that means that these residues are in higher quantities. For instance, North America has requested to Europe to increase the residue levels acceptable in the plants in the diet by 100. And in North America, in the States, the residues acceptable in some Roundup Ready tolerant plants have increased by 400, following the demand of the companies, but not on long-term testing on human health. This is why we have done that on the best model for human health, which is the rat physiology, and which is a universal model accepted when there are no clinical trials.
That's an excellent discussion. Let's talk about what studies have you conducted about GMOs?
First of all, we have taken the most representative GMO grown, one of the most representative. There are two major ones, soya and maize. We have taken maize because it's mostly accepted in Europe, and we have taken the character of Roundup tolerance, which is 80%, which represents 80% of the actual agricultural GMOs, as I said. And we have taken the this NK called NK603 GM maize because in my previous appointment as an expert for Europe, I was really concerned by the fact that 50 significant differences had been found during the consumption of this maize by rats by the Monsanto company. And these were disregarded as non-important by the company and by the regulators. So I decided to continue the test on the same strain of rats and on the same number of rats per group because nobody has done best today in the world concerning these products, and it's very, very expensive outside of the company to make tests on 50 rats per group. Nobody in the world has done that for this kind of product. So we have continued and followed the experiment, and we have, of course, there are limitations on statistics on the first results of mortality and tumors because the rats are dying progressively and there are less and less rats overall when they are treated. So we have made nice statistics on the biochemistry. We have measured 50 parameters at least per rat 11 times during for 200 rats. So that makes an increasing number of an incredible number of parameters. This allowed to make very nice statistics called the OP-LSDA method used for genomics usually. And we have found that kidney and liver parameters were disturbed, including sexual hormonal parameters, and this was explaining the pathology. All was made double-blinded, so the personnel in the lab didn't know what were the treatments of the rats, and the anatomopathologist and statistician didn't know what were the treatments of the rats, and the microscopist also. So we compiled all the data, and we removed the codes in order to know what treatment did what. And we saw that there were in males severe hepatorenal toxicities confirmed by differences and discriminant differences in biochemical markers, and these toxicity were explaining the death, according to the pathologist, of the males mostly. And we had also disrupted hormonal balance, which was confirmed by the statistics, or PLSDA statistics, and these hormonal balance, plus the fact that the pituitaries were disabled in females, confirmed that the females had tumors from hormonal origin, a lot of tumors, and the pathologist confirmed that the females died mostly from these tumors.
So what were the final results of your studies in these rat studies with GMOs?
Sorry, what did I finally what?
What were the final results? What did you conclude?
The final result that we have concluded in the journal is that the long-term consumption of this maize, which is Roundup Ready tolerant, and also the long-term consumption of very low doses of Roundup residues could provoke liver and kidneys toxicities, very severe ones, that can explain the mortality and the tumors, and for females that these diets provoke tumors, mammary tumors in numbers, and finally the fact that the rats die, the female rats die. So this were our findings, and the originality of the work is that it was the most detailed in the world and the longest experiment on these products, which are the major pesticides of the world and the major character of the agricultural GMOs in the world.
Very good. Well, in all fairness, what are the benefits of GMO, genetically modified products on food? What are the benefits of that technology?
Well, on food up to date, there are not many because they are pesticide plants, and that promote industrial agriculture with pesticides. However, it's not for growth. I mean, the genes that have been inserted do not allow the plant to grow better, but the pesticide use will increase the yield in short term and will decrease and render toxic the plant on the long term. However, there are some benefits of GMOs in general, which are the knowledge about the genes. There is no one gene that you know that you can think of that has not its own GMO in vitro, in labs, in order to understand its role, and also to make drugs or enzymes in confined areas that are given to patients or in the food with traceability. And these products can be purified and traced. This is not the case for agricultural edible GMO that are not labeled in North America. And unfortunately, nobody can, in epidemiological studies, correlate the pathologies I have spoken about, like hepatorenal diseases, hormonal diseases, and breast tumors. Nobody can relate that to the consumption of these GMOs because they are all mixed and not labeled in the food and feed. And they have been increasing by 1 or 5% every year since the last 15 years. And there is no traceability at the level of the cattle also. And the cattle is sacrificed for consumption quite early in its life in general. So it is not easy to know what that can give on the long term without managing these studies, and that is why we have done that.
Well, excellent. The liabilities of GMOs in food, you've pretty much outlined it as tumors and other challenges to the consumer, whether it's an animal. What about if humans consuming the animal that consume the maize or the corn? What are the health problems for the consumers that could eat the maize or the cattle that eat this corn? Yes.
In fact, we are pretty sure that the mammals are sick or can be sick on the long term, and it's unhealthy to eat disabled animals. For instance, as the kidneys have major problems, then you can have like urine residues in the tissues, and it's not good for health to eat these kind of animals that have been poisoned on a chronic way, chronically, I mean, and this is not good. Moreover, we know that the pesticide residues do pass the food chain, because in Europe we had to put some new rules about Roundup residues in the livers and kidneys of pigs or cattle in general, because these residues are found today in these meats, in this kind of meats, and we know that we have to settle new standards and new limits because of importing transgenic soya tolerant to Roundup from North America. So mostly in Europe, we have essentially transgenic soya tolerant to Roundup has an additive in food, and it is the only GMO that we have, mostly because we are autonomous for maize or corn, and we do not cultivate, or only 0.5% of our surfaces. We do not cultivate these products too much. So my opinion is that in order to protect the agricultural American economy, and in order to have a high quality food, you need the transparency on the tests that have allowed the market release of these products. First, it is abnormal that they still remain confidential, like the blood analysis of the rats that Monsanto did within 90 days for these maize. The blood analysis of the rats, the raw data are confidential. This is abnormal, and this would make a new scientific debate, which is important for food security, and then it is also important to prolong and to run the official and necessary the long-term testing of these products on health before releasing that. Otherwise, more and more chronic disease and hormonal disease would increase in North America without anybody being able to trace the reason why. If we have not been able, as a humankind, to oblige the companies to make long-term testing on rats before giving that to kids on the long term, then I think we cannot see us in the mirror directly in the future.
Well, Dr. Seralini, your studies have been very illuminated here in the United States in a number of newspaper articles. What advice would you give to consumers as a scientific research developer about GMOs in food?
Well, I have advised the European government. You know that we have 450 million people in 27 countries. Now in Europe, the regulation of GMOs is the same at all the countries. And I've advised these structures to label GMOs, and this was obtained in 1999. I was, of course, with a lot of other people and experts to request that. So this is the first thing to have, the labeling of GMOs. Otherwise, you cannot do any epidemiological study. You cannot have the choice anyway, even if they are good, to say, yes, I want a patented seed in my meal, or I don't want patents on food and living organisms. And even that, you need the labels because you will know where the residues of pesticides are, and this is very important for organic agriculture, and this is also very important for long-term health, in my opinion, but in the opinion of more and more researchers around the world. This can give chronic disease in the long term. So, so the first advice is labeling of GMOs. The second advice is transparency. This will not cost $1. The transparency about the tests that have been performed already by the companies, the raw data of the blood analysis of the rats. This is very important because it is secret. We cannot accept that as a democracy, to keep these blood analysis secret. And if you have these, then the debate will be on the a test that has to be performed by these companies before commercializing that on a very high speed and on 100 or 160 million hectares around the world. We cannot assume, once again, as a humankind, to say it's good for people to eat that during their entire life, but not having. But if we are not able to test that on animals first on the long term, just because, not because there were artificial genes or because a gene is dangerous. This is not my point. But because the plants have been modified to contain pesticide residues and to be able to absorb more and more pesticide residues, or to create those by themselves, synthesizing new insecticides. And you know that a lot of chronic diseases are not explainable by new viruses or new bacteria or by a genetic shift within 50 years. But there are more and more hormonal problems that can be due to pollutants in general and pesticides in particular. So this is why the regulation of agricultural GMOs, which are all pesticide plants, according to the patents and the commercialization of these products in the fields, and according to the companies, that are the companies themselves, we need to know that. I'm afraid that because there is not enough communication in general, and because there is a lot of wrong advertisement on these things, people discover only now, after 15 years of cultures, that agricultural GMOs are pesticide plants. And this is a shame, because that means that our so-called scientific technical world is not aware of what he eats, really. and that the advertisement of the companies are stronger than independent science, unfortunately.
Well, Dr. Seralini, your research is particularly appropriate for about 35 million Californians, which I live in the state of California in the United States. In a very short time, the state population will be voting on a proposition to label food which has incorporated ingredients which are genetically modified. Would you
Yeah.
endorse that sort of labeling of food?
Yes, of course. I highly recommend this labeling because it's the first way to know in the population and to be able to link one day the disease to the nature of the food and to be able then to choose. The right to know is very important for not only for the consumer's health, but also for the agricultural quality on the long term. Otherwise, if you have any problem, then all the countries from the world will buy the food elsewhere, and all the population will not trust anymore the authorities and the companies. So even for the companies themselves, it is important, if they are proud of the quality of their products, to label those in order to indicate the potential added values of these products. This is the base of the liberal market. In order to be proud of the product, then you label the added value and you explain what you have and how it has been tested on the long term. Otherwise, you take in hostage all the population. And then you know that in Europe we are even labeling now the animals that have eaten this food in order to know if there are any problems in the future. So we have labeled eggs, milk, and cheese and meat in some instances as fed with GMOs or not fed with GMOs. And I think it is important to go in this direction too, because anyway, even if some GMOs are forbidden because they are demonstrated to be toxic on the long term, which will be difficult since the companies are lobbying a lot in this area, then it will take time to remove everything and to have a new generation of GMOs good for health. So during this time, the labeling is the only security to have a choice.
Let me ask you, with a food that has been fed with GMO products, is it more expensive for them to feed cattle and other animals that we consume without GMO?
Well, it all depends on the externalities of the cost and the financial health of the government. For instance, you imagine that an apple with 50 pesticides today is often less expensive than an organic apple. Why? Because we needed a lot of oil to make the pesticides, we needed a lot of oil to spread the pesticides, and a lot of machines that have costed a lot more for the society in general. So the only reason is that there are a lot of financial helps in order to develop all these products, including GMOs. And also, there are a lot of helps for the subventions of agriculture in quantity, but not in quality enough. And also, the externalization of the purification of the water to purify the water to make it without pesticides, etc., is not counted on the price. And also, the health cost of these products that can give human disease and animal disease are not counted in the price of this product. So if you internalize all the costs that are not seen today, then GMOs are a lot more expensive for the society than regular normal agriculture with less pesticides or without pesticides at all. So I think that talking about the price depends on the politics of this system, and the politics is decided by politicians. Unfortunately, most of them are helped by big companies, and this distorts the visibility of the real situation.
Very good. Let's talk for a minute about your other projects and programs at the University of Caen in France.
Well, I have just published this month and finished 3 other papers. One on The hidden toxicity of Roundup we have found by mass spectrometry and other very precise techniques that the active principle of the toxic active principle of the Roundup on human cells was not glyphosate, which is it's a little bit technical, but which is the usual herbicide tested on the long term by the company, but was another hidden product called POE15. And then we had the second project that we have just finished on the measurements of pesticide residues in the urine of little kids that were the kids of a farmer, but they were not in contact with the farm at all because the farmer spread the pesticides several kilometers away from its house and the pesticides were in the urine of one kid. There were congenital problems. The two of the kids were born without anus in this family. This is why we studied this family. And just by contact with the hair of the father, the kid got some pesticide in its urine the day after. Because the little kid, 3 to 5 years, embraced his father probably at the dinner, and then he got by the skin and the hair some of the pesticides in the urine. And the third paper is a regulation papers about GMO signed with 30 other authors throughout the world to explain all what I said. And now we have to publish another 4 to 5 papers out of our study in order to see the chronological effects in each organ of the treatments I've explained, GMOs and pesticides alone and GMO combined with pesticides. So it's already a lot of work for the years to come.
Well, Dr. Seralini, your study about the aerosolization of the pesticides around the body of the farmer is particularly apropos to Central Californians because it's an entirely agricultural area. Pesticides are sprayed and other chemicals are sprayed through helicopters and aircraft all throughout this area. What's your general research telling you about this practice and its effect on human health?
Oh, I hate these practices because it's a shame for human health. And you know, my main research is on the effects of the major pollutants of the rivers and the food on human health in the long term. So we studied atrazine, we studied bisphenol A and other plasticizer. We are not studying especially Monsanto's products. But it is the reality that Monsanto's products are, in fact, among the major pollutants of surface waters, for instance. Some of them are spread by helicopters, including other pesticides, and this is the best way to contaminate everything, including the little kids and the human population and animals in general. I mean, today the highest risks is there when the population is consuming these products, but even more when the population is directly exposed by spray to these products. And I think this is a known practice from the beginning of the 20th century, of last century, and we should have more modern and more precise methods today in order to avoid the disease that can be even disease at birth for kids, because you know that a lot of these products are passing through the placenta and going to the fetuses when they are in the mother's body, and this will of course increase their disorders during the entire life when they are contaminated at the fetal level. So my advice is to avoid completely this kind of practices that are only cheaper than manual work because they are more health and because there are a lot of and there is a lot of oil. But as soon as we change the energy system, then this will reveal its real cost. and it's really costly in comparison to the normal work with products on plants.
Very good. Dr. Seralini, I'd like to now allow you to summarize your research in GMO products and their influence in food and eventually their influence on human health.
Well, we had the most original, the most detailed study on GMO on a lifelong term, and we had also the most detailed study on a pesticide in its formulation, so that means like it is in the bottle of the gardener or the agricultural worker, but highly diluted. This is the only work that was done on that on the long term, and we discovered a lot of toxicities at the levels of livers, kidneys, and for males, and also kidneys and mammary tumors for females. We think they must be forbidden from the commercialization of these products, and that the transparency on the tests that have been performed by the companies, the raw data should be immediately in action. So, and then we think that long-term testing should be mandatory for all these products. Otherwise, the health effects on humans will take our lives in hostages, if I am clear.
Dr. Seralini, as you know, the audience for this show are food production, food quality, food safety, and food security managers. What is your advice to those people whose careers are in the production of food?
Well, those people who are investors and who help financially the companies or the quality of food should request at first really the transparency on the tests that were performed. We cannot stand anymore in the humankind in the 21st century that the blood analysis of rats will be kept as a treasure in a closed, very closed secrecy by the companies and the governments. So we should release that, because I think it's another health Madoff affair, since there can be more vested interests than the 65 million euros or billion euros that have been taken by Madoff, if the newspapers are right. So today, we need the transparency first in order to invest, and to request in order to invest securely the long-term testing before any choice possible for the consumer, and then to respect not only the consumer but the entire life by the right to know. So that means by the labeling of the products. If they have an added value, they should be proud of that. And this, believe me, in Europe we have put that, and it costs a lot less than an unidentified product, because when we had unidentified products in the food making problems, then we have lost billions and billions, like in the mad cow disease, to try to remove the products from the good food chains. And since there are a lot of retailers, they are concerned a lot also about selling the products that are non-identified and that could be toxic. So in case of problem, the labeling is a network of security for the quality of the food and feed, and this is why we have labels everywhere in the drugstores. So the GMOs, if they are the agricultural GMOs, if they are good, should be under this legislation, this normal and regular legislation in a liberal market.
Very good. Dr. Seralini, I'd like you now to conclude our interview with any closing remarks that you might have, and allow you a few minutes to discuss generally with these audience, these managers in food production,
right,
food quality, food safety, and food security. Go ahead.
Well, a lot of regulators, or hidden regulators, I mean scientists that in fact have served in the regulatory process, try to make a shame on my person and on my studies just because my conclusions are disturbing their benefits. So I think that we should really be careful before taking a position in this and request a transparency first. It's a really hot topic in the world because these agricultural GMOs have benefited of a lot. They have benefited with a lot of public funds, and it is hard to change a habit from one day to another. But really, the transparency is the first step, and the labeling another one. And this is highly reachable right now, and there will be less fighting in science if the transparency exists on the tests that have allowed to the market release. Think just about the fact that, on the other hand, we cannot support to give to our kids, to the patients, to our parents, and elderly or disabled people, this food and feed during a life without being able to oblige the test on a on a chronic way, on a lifelong testing on rats. And I think we will be proud of humankind when we will have the transparency and the mandatory test on the long term for all the products, for all the pollutants that we are exposed to on the long term.
Very good.
This is what I have written and explained in my book, which is published in French right now, and it's called All Guinea Pigs for these reasons, because now we are all guinea pigs of a system which is non-transparent and not long-term tested.
So it's guinea pigs in English, is that correct?
Yeah, guinea pigs.
Okay. Very good. Well, Dr. Seralini, I'd like to thank you for your time. We know that there's a big difference in time between France and California. And thank you again for this wonderful interview, and wish you a good day.
I thank you. A good day and a good luck to you all, and sorry for my English.
Excellent interview. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.